Hey guys, welcome to Growth on the Daily, the personal development podcast for athletes. This is the podcast that helps athletes overcome the challenges we face every single day. I am Ray Lambie. I'm your host. I'm passionate about sports. I'm passionate about self-growth, and I'm so excited to get into another Real Talk interview segment. This week, guys, I have Brandon Tang on the show. He is no typical athlete. He's an academic scholar studying computer science and stats at the University of Toronto, and he's also a multi-sport athlete. Brandon began his athletic career playing hockey with over 12 years of experience, and he even made it to a prep school level where he played at Milton Academy in the ISL. He then transitioned into an elite track athlete, where he has since helped land U of T the title of second place in the country. So I'm super excited to have Brandon on the show today, and we're probably going to talk about a range of topics, but really want to focus on succeeding in student athlete life and balancing all that has to come with it. So Brandon, hi, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
No, of course. So why don't we start off with you just giving a bit of a breakdown of what brought you to the podcast?
Yeah, I like to talk. I think it's interesting always to talk about, yourself and reflect back on certain strategies or, your experiences. And especially with we don't know each other too well, but it's definitely nice to talk to other people about those things. And then also, I don't know, I've been kind of getting into podcasts, so I think I thought it'd be a fun experience, I guess.
100%. Well, I love to hear that, and we're glad to have you here. So excited to see what comes from this interview. But I know we have a ton to talk about, so let's dive right in. I want to start off with you mentioning about your experience transitioning from team sports to solo sports. So take us through that journey. How did it go from becoming an elite hockey player to now a track athlete?
Yeah, so I guess like you mentioned, so I played hockey for most of my life, and then just kind of suddenly, I ran a little bit of track in high school. I ran one season, so a few months, but nothing too serious. But yeah, and then decided to walk on to the track team at U of T, and it's a big transition, but again, it's still relative sports and in a team environment, but where you compete for individual, you focus on your individual events and compete mostly for your own personal records, I guess, and then to support the team. I think the biggest thing was, in the team, you're more responsible for everyone, I guess. You have to make sure that, you show up every day and that your performance affects a lot of the other people around you. And I know for hockey, if I had a bad game, my line mates or whatever, they would feel or they would affect them as well. But in track, it's a bit different, I guess, unless you're running relays, most of the time, your personal performance has very little effect on the team, unless it's in a championship setting where I guess you have to get points and whatever. But you definitely feel a lot more responsible for, I guess, yourself. You have to be more accountable for yourself, I think. Your performance doesn't really it's not directly correlated with everyone else's performance. But then again, it does add up to a team score and whatever. And also, I think the environment's a bit different because in a team setting, like in hockey, you're really close with your teammates and you're working together. But in track, it's a little bit different where you have to compete against your own teammates, and that sometimes it's fun and competitive, but at also times it can be very difficult because some of these guys, your teammates are your best friends, your closest friends, and you have to fight with them for spots on the rosters or in championship races. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I can imagine that because, I don't know, I'm thinking about my experience playing hockey too, and everything you're saying is completely accurate, right? You have natural camaraderie and, everyone's kind of got their backs and it's it's a team's game, right? And that's, like you said, a completely different environment once you're entering the track world or just a solo sport world. But you're also kind of hybrid, as you mentioned, because you're still on a team. So you got to have to navigate those waters. So I'm just curious because I know you ended up walking onto the track team, but what was sort of the shift from leaving hockey in the first place? Was that something that you were initially trying to pursue at a varsity level?
Yeah, I guess my dream was to play D1 for an Ivy League or something. But because of COVID, I couldn't play my senior year, and I ended up just kind of. I still thought about continue to play juniors maybe, but then when I was when I got my offer for computer science at U of T, I kind of thought playing another like 3 4 years of juniors was kind of not the route that I wanted to take. I didn't want to like graduate much later than I guess. I know. I mean, I have some friends who still play juniors and they're still trying to play D1, but yeah, they're starting college like next year probably. So it's not something that I thought about it, and it's not something that I wanted to do. So I was like, going to college. I still wanted to play sports. I've had playing sports my whole life, so I wanted to do something. And I thought like track, I had a good chance at versus like I know UFT for example, like they asked for like everyone to use their like junior eligibility up, and just not something that I was interested in doing.
Yeah, and it's funny you said that, and because I can definitely relate to that. I know a ton of people that, they go that junior route, and like it's a hard game to play. I mean, not just the physical game, but like, the decision that you're committing for those years to then really delay anything outside of sports in your life, right? So that's a big commitment, especially if you're trying to do like, I don't know, grad school or other programs. And you're like, well, I think at some point you have to pick like what's more worth it to you and what are you more likely to actually reach, right? Because you also have the people who, they make that gamble and then it doesn't really work out too. So one, that's, I commend you for kind of making that decision for yourself. So let's talk about your varsity life, your university life. So take me through like your typical week, like with school or even day with training. Like how does that all add up?
Yeah, so I mean, generally speaking, the team usually has like 2 training slots, like one in the afternoonish, and then the main ones like in the evening. Most people go to the evening ones, so we usually start around like 5:30, and then train till like 7:30, 8ish, depending on if we have lifts or not. So we usually lift like 2 or 3 times a week. In season, it's less; it's like twice or maybe even once a week. And then like I said, in the fall we train pretty much like base training, so it's like almost every day. So we really get to build up a lot of volume for strength and whatever towards, so that when we come to like the in season, like in the winter, you're training like a lot less volume, just more like very high intensity, but a lot of like speed work. So yeah, you build a really good foundation. And we're also competing like every weekend pretty much. And I guess like last year, because with COVID, there was like less traveling, but this year we've been traveling a bit more, a few times to the US. And then I know nationals will be in Saskatchewan, so we usually travel like, and we go to Windsor and whatever. So you travel a decent amount. Class wise, it's kind of up to you, I guess, like depending on what kind of time slots you like. I try to get all my more classes done in the morning, so I can like kind of have a little bit of time to do some work before I go to practice. This semester, it's usually have like class like 9 a.m. I don't know. I used to think I'm a morning person, but not so much anymore. So I know last semester my classes were later, like I started like 10 or 11, so I got to sleep in a bit, but I'd stay up like pretty late. Stay up to like 2 and then wake up at whatever 9 or 10, and then like 5 6 hours of class, and then go to practice, and then do a little bit of work afterwards.
I mean, that's a lot in itself, but I laughed when you said I thought I used to be a morning person, and then I realized that I'm not. And I think every university student probably relates to that statement, just because the mornings probably just hit different when you're studying in school. That's hilarious. But cool that you're able to, have that outlined and have a little bit more balanced schedule, but that's definitely hectic, like traveling a lot more, especially like every weekend, and you're in a competitive program. So how do you navigate, I guess, the pressure to succeed? You're also, you go to U of T, like it's not an easy school. Plus you're a varsity athlete. There's got to be some performance pressure, not only coming from yourself, but just sort of in general that you might feel just with life, sports, academics. So how do you feel that you navigate that?
I'm a very prideful person, so I take a lot of pride in like what I do and like how I do things. So there's definitely a lot of pressure that I put on myself. Mostly I would say it's pressure from myself to perform well in the classroom and like on the track as well. In terms of pressure, I think it's really just the experience thing. I mean, I think I've grown a lot in the last, I guess, few years, basically transitioning from, I guess, high school to university and whatnot. One thing I try to do is I just try to be more patient with myself, spend a lot of time, I do spend a lot of time reflecting on things that I feel like are not, I guess, important. And I think that the key is really just to be patient and give yourself time to achieve these things that you want to do, and to, I guess, like be humble about things, and just take every day, be grateful for certain opportunities and whatnot. I really just try to enjoy the process and enjoy what I like to do. So the results don't come right away, it's hard, but for track, one meet could be bad. So a little bit upset for a few days, but then, the next week comes around and we compete again. So you can't really think too much about it. just enjoy it, I guess, like just be out there with my friends, you know.
Yeah, and everything you're saying, I'm just connecting to it and just it's really resiliency that from athletics, right? That's honestly where I think it comes from because like you said, you win some, you lose some, and it's part of the deal. Not easy, but you show up regardless. And so I think that's a really good sentiment. But you did mention something that I actually really loved, which was being patient with yourself. And I think that's something that a lot of people will probably just really want to connect with, that idea of patience, because I don't know if you feel the same way, so definitely disagree, let me know. But I feel like our generation is very much, they need to get so much done when they're young. And I just mean like in terms of like being successful and reaching like new heights and all this pressure to, be the best that you can be so young because, we have all this access, there's resources, there's no excuse to you sort of not achieving and not making it. And the idea of patience seems almost counterintuitive to that, and it's almost as if like things take time to grow and to flourish, but you have to you got to let that like marinate and put in that work for that to come into fruition, right? And so I really commend you for having that sort of mindset because that's not easy to have at all. So I definitely love to hear that. What is your sort of process in that reflection period that you mentioned? What does that reflection look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I have mastered that skill yet. I mean, it's pretty funny because I was actually just like, I went home for the weekend, so I'm at home right now. But yeah, like I was just talking to my dad about very similar things because I'm applying to trying to get jobs for the summer or like research opportunities and whatever. And haven't heard back from too many yet. But yeah, I was just talking to my dad. He's trying to tell me, like just to be patient with myself and to. One of the things he's telling me just to enjoy, like, being young and like being able to play sports and whatnot. So it's something that I guess, yeah, like I said, I take for granted too often and I forget about these things. I think social media is like a big thing. I always see like, or yeah, just like hearing about things or seeing things like on the internet, which is often like, is like it's not very good to like trust these things. Like, it's hard to, I guess, put into perspective, like whatever, it's hard to, sometimes you can't really believe everything you see, but it's so much information and so much like just content, I guess, that you see, and it's kind of overwhelming, and it's easy to fall into that trap of like, oh, like this person's doing that, or I think this person's very successful because they did this, and you're like, oh, like I should be doing the same thing. But yeah, I think it's easy to fall into that, and like I said, like I just try to enjoy like the little things, I guess, like being out there with my teammates and being able to spend time with them and stuff like that.
I love that. I feel like you're focusing on what matters most and you're also like holding the people close to you in those moments. So that's amazing because I think I definitely agree. Like social media and just media in general is a lot of noise, right? And it's easy, as you said, to compare yourself to other people and somehow use that as a gauge to reflect your own performance, which I don't think is an accurate measure, but I also think it's difficult to navigate. Well, if it looks like this person is doing so well, like why maybe I'm not doing that because I'm not putting into practice what they're doing. And then, you get into this cycle. And that's, like you said, a dangerous zone to be in, but you have to like ground yourself, like you said, and focus on why you do what you love, right? And for you, that's doing something, being able to move your body, play sports, connect with people, and have enjoy that time with your friends. So I think that's amazing. And I really hope that anyone listening to this interview really takes that into practice for themselves, because especially younger athletes, because it's really easy to get into that negative mindset and that just hinders you right off the bat. So definitely on there too. That's awesome. I really appreciate you sharing that. One thing that I think is beneficial for our listener here is to understand how you actually balance sports and academics. And I just mean in the sense of not just on like the workload and the sports perspective with your training and volume schedule, but also in terms of kind of prioritizing what you do, because, there's only so many hours in a day. And you also, like you said, want to enjoy your life. So what does that balanced lifestyle look to you, and how have you found, or at least working towards that balance?
Yeah, I think, the key word is balance. And yeah, I mean, it's, you really got to find what works for you. For myself, I usually just try to set like, I set aside like during the day up to whatever, like I guess the night, I'm, every hour that I have, I'm trying to do something, just chip away slowly at whatever assignment, even if it's due like next week or whatever, I just chip away slowly. I usually, it's not, maybe this is not the best habit, but I try to just, even if it's just writing something like very simple down, like just attempting it, even if it's like a bad attempt, I just try to get something down and like try to get familiar with whatever the assignment is or the content is. And, yeah, and then, I go to training. I kind of take that as my like big break in the day. I set aside, 2-3 hours. Like when I'm at the track, I just focus on, being there, working on whatever skills or things that I have to do to improve my performance there. So to really just, I guess, like focus on like when I'm at school, I'm focusing only on school. And then when I'm at the track, only focus on sports. And then over like by the time it's the weekend, when I do have like a few hours at night, when I'm gonna like try to hang out with my friends and have fun, that's what I'm doing. So just find balance, I guess like when you have time to really focus on things, just try not to, I guess, like get distracted or whatever.
That's awesome. I think your idea of focus is great. And it's just like being present in the moment, like you said, like just have, you're doing one thing at a time. And I also like the aspect of just putting something down, like you said. And I just feel like that's a big thing because I feel like many people procrastinate. And I'm sure you also do. I think all of us do. And anyone who says they don't, I really don't believe them. But I think the idea of just like starting, even though you don't really have the time to get anything, tangible in there, it's at least a start, and progress is progress. So I really like that idea. And I'm glad that's something that you do, as I think a lot of people can, including myself, can learn from that, right? Like it's 15 minutes of working on something is, better than nothing. So that's awesome that you have found, what works for you, and you still also make time to enjoy yourself alongside, being an athlete and an academic scholar. So that's awesome. So thank you for sharing that. To end us off on this interview, I'm just wondering if you have any advice for anyone who's either an aspiring varsity athlete or current varsity athlete on how they can navigate student athlete life.
Yeah, the biggest thing is probably just to show up and I guess be humble about like what you do and how you're doing it. And yeah, it's just to be patient. Not everything will come overnight, I guess. I guess that's a bit cliche to say, but it really is true. And yeah, you just have to, I guess, keep your head down and really work where your goals are. And to, I guess, enjoy. I think that the key is just really enjoy it. So, like I said, like I take pride in like what I do. So, like when the results do come back, that's something that I'm actually very proud of, and that keeps me going to keep working. And I guess it keeps me driven, keeps me focused. Yeah, just sometimes it's hard to see like how like certain things might help or whatever, but to just to be humble about it and just like get it done even when you feel like it's not useful or like it might not help, just to get it done, just to be there, I think eventually will lead to good things, even if it's not your number one, your dream goal or something. You'll land, I guess, like relatively close.
I love that. That's a great way to end off this episode. I think our listeners are going to have a ton of key takeaways and lessons from that. I just want to thank you, Brandon, for coming on the Growth on the Daily podcast. It's been a pleasure interviewing you. I feel much closer to you now, so that's great. I'm excited to see where you take your track career and your CS degree going forward. So thank you so much for coming on the show. Just to wrap up this episode, guys, this is our Real Talk segment with Brandon Tang. This is the Growth on the Daily podcast, a personal development podcast for athletes, where we help athletes overcome the challenges we face on the daily. If you guys want to stay involved in our community, check us out on Instagram at Growth on the Daily, and for all of our resources, growthonthedaily.com on our website. All right, guys, thank you so much, and thank you, Brandon.